What's up, everybody? I'm James Riley. I am back with more Revenge of Magic. We are on Chapter 9. And if you remember in the last chapter, Fort finally gets to the Oppenheimer School, and it is boring. It looks like a military base, which is fine, but like he was expecting a school for magic with all this exciting stuff. The one weird thing, though, is that all the soldiers on the base are sort of... They're there for his protection, Dr. Ops keeps saying, but they're all focused on him. Like, he's the dangerous one. So I'm sure that's not going to be the case. So, Chapter 9. The training hall entrance doors were guarded by two more soldiers, each holding their weapons in their hands, though aimed at the ground. Fort smiled to the one closest to him as they entered, but the guard just stared back without a hint of friendliness. "New student," Dr. Ops murmured to the guards, and both of them nodded, still watching Fort carefully. Dr. Ops touched a badge to a small black box beside the door, and a small light clicked from red to green, unlocking the doors. He pulled one open and gestured for Fort to enter, which he did, followed by two of the soldiers accompanying them. Inside, two more soldiers waited at a desk behind a large, incredibly thick pane of glass, or maybe some kind of transparent plastic. On either side were metal turnstiles that rose all the way up to the ceiling. The guards at the desk took Fort's fingerprints through a small opening in the plastic wall, then aimed a camera at him and took a quick photo. They handed over a badge that looked a lot like Dr. Ops, only Fort's had the word "student" in large letters at the top, and showed a photo of him looking completely unaware he was getting his picture taken. "I could retake this photo if you want," Fort suggested to the guard, but the man ignored him. Dr. Ops held his badge to another black box, this one by the turnstiles, and something clicked, allowing him to turn the metal teeth as he pushed through. Fort passed through the turnstiles as well, but the soldiers stayed behind. "They're not coming with us?" he asked Dr. Ops as the soldiers turned and left the training hall. "No, they're not needed here," the doctor said. "We've reinforced the training hall to withstand almost anything you students can throw at it. Remember when I showed you Rachel blowing up the wall? We've taken precautions, so that's not possible anymore. We want you to be able to use the powers you gain in a safe place, after all. Just never against another student, outside certain parameters." Ford stopped in place. "Wait, what? What do you mean, outside certain parameters?" Dr. Ops didn't seem to hear the question. Instead, he kept moving, and eventually Fort had to jog to catch up, reaching the doctor at a bank of elevators. Instead of going up or down, Dr. Ops used his badge to pass through another set of doors just beyond the elevators. "I've arranged for your testing to happen immediately," he said, holding one of the doors for Fort. "We'll have to be a bit quicker than usual, as the classes will need the books back for training." "Testing?" Fort asked, his heart beginning to race. "Is this when I find out which type of magic I'll be learning?" Dr. Ops nodded. "There will be 20 or so, school administrators watching, but don't let them bother you. Just concentrate on the words you see in the books, and you'll be fine." There was going to be an audience of school administrators, whatever that meant. Fort swallowed hard, now more nervous than excited. Rachel had mentioned something about him being watched, but he'd figured that meant Dr. Ops, and maybe one or two others. But 20 people? Couldn't he just try a spell first in private for practice? They passed several offices with the same thick, transparent walls that had covered the front desk, allowing Fort to see in. Most of the offices were filled with soldiers in camouflage uniforms at desks, some on phones, others typing on computers. Many of them looked up and stared as he walked past, and more than one rose from their seat in surprise, one even letting his hand rest on his weapon. At the end of the corridor, double doors opened into a large circular room. Stone benches ringed the room on each level, and a set of stairs led down to a center area with a wooden podium. Fort froze as he entered, recognizing the room as the same one where Rachel had blown up the wall. He glanced over to where the hole should have been, and found it repaired, though a thin line still showed the outline of her attack. Most of the room was empty, but various men and women sat on the lowest level of seats, the ones nearest the podium. These people weren't wearing camouflage like the soldiers, but instead had uniforms that looked very official and intimidating. Lots of stars and medals everywhere. As the men and women turned to look at Fort, he heard them murmur comments to each other quietly. "That's him? He won't last a day. Why are they even bothering? This whole thing is pointless. We can't train that one. We can't train one that we know can't handle the power. Why Charles and Oppenheimer want this kid here is beyond me." Kind of rude, huh? You'll find out why. "I apologize that we're late," Dr. Ops said, ignoring their comments. "This is Forsyth Fitzgerald, and you all know his unfortunate history. I know this isn't the way we usually do things, so I thank you for allowing me this experiment." What? Experiment? That's what Fort was to them? Was this because his birthday wasn't on the day the books were discovered? Dr. Ops turned to Fort as the others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "Don't worry about anything but the magic," he whispered, guiding Fort to the podium. "It's really just a simple test. Pick up the books one by one and turn to the first page. The books will start you on the least powerful spell and won't let you read further in until you've mastered that one, so you won't have a choice anyway. Fort nodded, since it seemed like the response Dr. Ops wanted, but the doctor had already turned to take a seat, leaving Fort standing alone in front of everyone. His palms began to sweat, so he wiped them on his pants, feeling way too many eyes on him. Strangely, the lights seemed to flicker as he stood at the podium, and several of the officers looked around curiously, so Fort knew this wasn't a usual problem. Maybe it was some kind of reaction to the magic he was about to perform? 2 books lay on the podium, both closed. Strange letters ran across each cover, but as he touched them, the letters seemed to blur, changing into words he could read, just like they had in Dr. Ops's memory. The one on the left said, "The magic of destruction and its many uses," while the one on the right was, "The magic of recuperation and restoring what has been. Blowing things up or healing paper cuts." There wasn't even a choice here. He had to learn destruction magic. Healing would be useless against those monsters. To make them suffer, he needed powerful weapons on his side. Fort picked up the magic of destruction. The tome felt much heavier than it looked, and Fort almost fumbled it back to the podium. Someone behind him coughed, and Fort blushed as he heard someone else mumble, "He can't even lift it. This kid's useless." His face burning, Fort quickly opened the destruction book to the first page and set it back down on the podium. Whatever the spell was, he was going to make it the most powerful one these people had ever seen. He leaned over and scanned the page, only it didn't look like a spell. It actually looked more like a poem. "One for the body, bones and skin, one for the spirit, its spectral kin, one for the mind, thoughts and dreams, one for the world from dirt to streams, one for all space, wide and vast, one for all time, future and past, 7 from 6, the rest unearthed, one save all, if proved their worth." Fort's eyes widened as he read. What did that mean? Was it some sort of... Forsyth, I forgot, Dr. Ops said from his seat. "I'll explain that poem later. It's in all the books. Just turn one page further." Fort nodded, despite facing away from the doctor, and turned to the next page, where the same unreadable language that had been on the cover of the book slowly morphed into something legible here, too. "Canterbury's flash. Ignite the air before you, creating a dazzling light to momentarily blind your foes." A small picture to the right of that showed what looked to be some sort of short, goblin-like creature wandering around blind. Below the description were 2 words not in English, and they didn't seem to be translating themselves. "Gen Rexellum." As he read them, a warm feeling spread over him, and the words disappeared from the page, but their after-image seemed to burn into his brain. Had he just learned his first magical spell? Okay, Fort thought, make this the biggest flash they've ever seen. Fort turned back to the audience, then paused, not really sure how to cast the spell. Should he raise his hand? Did he need a wand? Or did he just say the words? And what happened if he pronounced them wrong? "Gen Rexellum," Fort whispered. He whispered, I shouldn't have been so... "Gen Rexellum," Fort whispered, holding up his hands. Immediately, power flowed through his body and out of his hands, setting them aglow. Too late, he realized he should have closed his eyes against the blinding flash. Unfortunately, there was no need. The flash from his hands slightly brightened the room momentarily, like there'd been a tiny power surge, then faded into nothing. Overall, there was even less of an effect than when the lights had flickered a moment earlier. "No!" he screamed in his mind. Why hadn't it worked better? He needed to learn destruction magic. There was no other option. "Even the healing students do better with destruction magic than that," someone said. "We already knew kids not born on Discovery Day are basically useless," someone else said. "Why is Oppenheimer bothering with this one?" "I can do better," Fort said, turning around to look at Dr. Ops. "Let me try again. I know I can do better." The doctor, though, was staring at the lights, looking lost in thought. He seemed to come out of it abruptly and turned back to Fort. "Move on to the other book, Forsyth." All the hope he'd felt since meeting Dr. Ops faded away almost to nothing, and Fort moved numbly to the second book. As he opened it, he wondered why he was even bothering. What was the point? He was here to learn how to fight monsters like the one that had killed his father, not healing someone's stubbed toe. What use was that? "Continue, please," Dr. Ops said from behind him. Fort wiped his sweaty hands on his shirt and looked down at the open book, skipping past the same poem from the destruction book. "Heal minor wounds and scrapes," the text said. "Restore small cuts or shallow burns with a cooling touch." The drawing next to it had a woman holding her hands over a man's arm, with a cut that barely would have required a band-aid. Great. Even more useless than he thought. but maybe if he could cast this spell, they'd give him another chance at destruction. Fort read over the words to the spell, Mon Decor, and again, they faded away. But as he turned back to his audience, ready to cast it, he realized he'd need someone to heal. Turning even brighter red, he looked pathetically at Dr. Ops. I need a minor scrape to heal. Dr. Ops snapped his fingers like he'd forgotten. Right. Anyone have an injury? If not, I can choose a volunteer. The others chuckled politely, while Fort tried not to climb under the podium to hide. I cut myself during training yesterday, said someone next to Dr. Ops. Fort turned to look at the man, and his eyes widened. He'd seen this man before. On television, standing in front of a bunch of reporters. What had his name been? The one who'd introduced the Department of Harm whatever? I'm Colonel Charles Forsyth, the man said, giving Fort a friendly smile and a small wave as he stood up. He pulled his uniform jacket off, then folded it up and left it on his chair before unrolling his shirt sleeve and presenting a small cut to Fort. One of my students was a bit overzealous. Fort nodded, not sure what else to say. He half wanted to apologize in case he made the cut worse, but instead he put his hands over the wound and shut his eyes just in case everything went horribly wrong. Mon Decor, he whispered. This time, Fort's hands seemed to lower in temperature, and he felt some weirdly cold energy leave his fingers and pass into the man's arm. Worried, he opened his eyes, expecting to have frozen the man's skin, but the cut had disappeared. I'd say that's a minor wound healed, Colonel Charles said, holding his arm up for the others to see. Looks like we've got ourselves a healing student. Not much of one, someone said as the group all rose to their feet, collecting their belongings. Wait, Fort said, stepping around to face Colonel Charles. I'm not a healer. I need to learn destruction magic. Let me try again. I swear I'll be better this time. The colonel smiled down at him gently. That's the spirit. Work hard and do your best here, Forsyth, and maybe we'll see if we can't get you into the destruction program after all. You look like you have the makings of a powerful warrior to me. He tousled Fort's hair, then returned to his seat to grab his jacket and followed the others out. When the room had emptied, Dr. Ops rose out of his seat and walked over to Fort, then patted him on the shoulder. You did well, he said, turning to the podium and closing each book. The next few days will be hard, but I have faith in you. You'll be a welcome new addition to the school. Fort turned away. That's not what the others were saying. They couldn't stop talking about how useless I was. Oh, that's just your imagination running away with you, Dr. Ops said as he walked Fort toward the door. None of the other administrators said a word during the entire test. What? How did Fort hear them if they weren't saying a word? Or is Dr. Ops lying? Did he not notice? What's going on? I guess we'll have to wait and find out as the book goes on. So next time will be... I'll read one more chapter. I'll read chapter 10. So come back in a few days and we will finish up the readings here. And I hope you've enjoyed all the readings from Revenge of Magic. Thanks, and I'll see you soon.